Hello, everybody. This is Founder Laerun, and I am here with Fantasy Grounds College. I am going to be showing a Game Master / Dungeon Master course. By no means is this a fix-all, do-all type thing. I will be showing the 5th edition rule set. However, most of what I'm teaching or showing will apply to most core rule sets. So hopefully you will be able to benefit that will help you learn to use the platform to run games. I think that one of the things that Fantasy Grounds presents is a lot of flexibility and also the ability to give people a chance to kind of use their creative juices. You're pretty much as confined as how much time you put into it. So I'm going to give you a few initial tips while we get started. Initially, before you join a game, make sure you get your players together. One thing you want to try to avoid, if possible, is running games wirelessly, especially if you're the host. It really makes for a potential problem. I'm not saying don't use wireless. I'm just saying that wireless is certainly not the most preferable way to run the game. Players, if you're wireless and you have connectivity issues, I would start with that first and then work your way back, because usually that's what it is, the wireless situation. The other thing is the assets you use, like tokens and maps, make sure they're not huge files, meaning file size and the dimensions. It's really hard to share all that information over the internet. You don't have a lot of bandwidth. So even if you have the best computer around, that doesn't mean your players do. And also, it doesn't mean they have the bandwidth to carry it. So just keep that in mind when you're sharing images and such. The other thing is just putting your time in with Fantasy Grounds. It's important that you spend time in it, you play around with it, you use it, you learn it, you basically own it at that point. So it's taken me about 2 years to really get a good handle on what it can do and some of its limitations and that sort of things. There's really no way to teach that in one session, but I'm going to give you some tips and some very basic stuff to help you get started. If you are a GM that's already using Fantasy Grounds, you might learn a couple things. So if you if you think you know everything, well, maybe you don't. But anyway, so I'm going to get started. So the first thing that really bothered me when I first started playing is that the space allowed on the desktop seems a little cramped. I would recommend having at least a 20-inch monitor or screen if you can help it. I know some of you are running this on a laptop. If your laptop has like a 15-inch screen, it's gonna be difficult. You can scale the screen, but it also scales down the text. So if you make more room, it just shrinks everything, including the text. So you got to find a balance between those two things. The other thing is, you can't change the fonts or anything unless you have an extension, and I'm not going to get into explaining all that, but basically we're kind of stuck with what font we have. So with that said, I'm going to get started with your organization and layout, which is very, very huge. It's underrated. A lot of people just dive right in and they don't think about how the table looks. So we're going to start with that. So normally when you log into Fantasy Grounds for the first time as a host, you're going to get a pop-up window which will give you the ability to run your setup for the first time. So the setup is basically the first page is user manual, wiki guide, forums. It's pretty self-explanatory. It takes you to all the help sections. I'm going to see about getting a Fantasy Grounds College button down here. We'll see. And then you hit next. And now the next thing is where you can actually load your rules. So if you don't own all of the core books, you can at least load the SRD and the basic rules. That gives you just enough to kind of get by. So the SRD is broken into 3 pieces. It has some magic items in one book. it has kind of a combination of the player's handbook and the DM's guide kind of mixed in the basic SRD part. And then there's the bestiary, which is a pared down version of the monster manual minus all of the artwork. So there's not a whole lot of artwork in the SRD. The basic rules is just a small little fraction of the actual rule set. So it gives you one character build, which is like a dwarven cleric all the way through. If you want more of the functionality, the drag and drop, that sort of thing, I would just go out and get at least the player's handbook. You don't necessarily have to buy every single book. But if you have the player's handbook as your basis, then a lot of the other things are much easier. It's easier to create modules and accessories than rulebooks. So if you want to hand enter all of that material, it has to be done in a certain way. And if you're not familiar with that process, it's just going to be a long process. It's going to take forever. So a lot of people said, well, I don't want to buy the books all over again. Yeah, I understand that, but at least have the core books. So that's what I've done here. So if you click on the 5e core rules, they're loaded. So all the core rules are loaded. And then if you want to go into your modules, you click on the modules button, and this is where you would load everything else. So it's kind of up to you about your content. Now, this is true of any rule set. So if you use Pathfinder or anything, at least have the core rule book. I mean, if you're stingy and you really don't have the money for it, save up, get the core rules, and then everything else is kind of gravy on top. I think that's the best advice I can give you, because I own the content physically. I own it in Fantasy Grounds and on D&D Beyond, and that gets pretty pricey. So if you need one solution, I think Fantasy Grounds is a good balance between the three. The other thing is don't push all rules here. This is the 5th edition all rules. That's pretty hard on your system, and especially don't do it when people are connecting to your table. I think they should actually take that out. That's a little overkill. That's just opinion, though. And you hit the next area, this comes to the options. So the options are pretty numerous. There's a lot of different things in here that really makes things, I want to say, difficult and tedious to explain in one outing. So I will bring these up as needed during the show. But what I'm going to do is go ahead and go through a couple of them. So if you're one of those individuals who wants to use Fantasy Grounds as a visual aid and you want to play around the table, there is a manual dice entry that you can turn on. And what it does is when a player rolls a dice physically, you roll it virtually, and then you have the ability to input the number that they received, and then it'll calculate the math if you want it to. So it's kind of an extra step, but that's, you can have manual entry. So that way, when you roll a 20, it doesn't give you the result. You hand enter the result based off the physical roll. So it's kind of a cool thing. This turn auto center map. I turn it off usually. It drives me crazy because you'll have a map set up, and when your turn is done and you pass it to the next person, the map actually moves to the other person. This is handy if you have a big map, but if you have a small battle map, it's not necessary. One of the things that kind of baffled me in the beginning was, where's the dice tower? I see this setting down here that says table dice tower. So if I click on, that technically only shows it for the clients that are connected to me. And the reason for that is, by default, Fantasy Grounds has hidden rolls. Oh, wow, look, I rolled a 1. How great. It has hidden rolls by default. However, if you also want to use the dice tower as the game master and you want to see it as well, like the players do, you have to turn it on from show GM rolls. So this is kind of connected to the show GM rolls, but that means you also have to roll in the dice tower for your hidden rolls. So there's kind of it's a kind of a hit and miss thing if you want that functionality. If you don't care, if you don't want to roll in the dice tower, then don't turn on the dice tower. Don't turn on show GM rolls. The dice tower location is default on the bottom right. I'd like you to right click on it, and if you unlock it, you'll be allowed to move wherever you want. I technically will put it next to my dice here. And I'll right click and lock the position. And then also this chat window, when you normally get it, it's locked and it's like this vertically. So I usually take the bottom right corner and drag it and kind of shrink it, because you really don't need it that big. And then it will fit really nice in this little spot here. And it's kind of set up to where it's all in one place. So I'll turn off the options for right now. I'm not going to explain every single one, but for right now, that's how you do the dice tower. Is you turn on the dice tower for your players. If you also want to use the dice tower, you have to turn on chat show GM roll. So now if I roll in the dice tower by dragging and dropping the dice on this image, it will roll in the chat. And it even it shows a little picture of a dice tower and an eyeball with a line through it, which means it's hidden. However, if I drop a 20-sided in the chat without the dice tower, then it will be an open roll. So I kind of like that flexibility so I can see what's going on. Because every now and then you do need to show a roll, and there's a way to do that, but I like doing it this way better. So this is more of a preference than a requirement, but laying your table out a certain way every time is super, super helpful and very, very efficient and less time consuming. So I laid out this area here where I'm going to have my chat window, but I want to right click and lock it so it doesn't move. And the dice tower is already locked, so I don't have to worry about that. Okay, you can change the color of your dice. Right now my dice are kind of a light blue, kind of for the theme. But in order to get it to show up better, I think I'm going to adjust it a little bit darker and maybe even change the letters. So I'm going to go up to the top right corner where it says colors. So I'm going to use the dice to point, but it's up here on the top right. There's like a little color palette. So when I click on that, here's the dice color changer and the text changer. So the text you can only have is black and white. So I'm going to make the dice a little darker so that they show up better in the chat. And then you can actually fade. You can change the opacity a little bit. It's not recommended to make them invisible, but anyhow, that's basically your dice there. You can change them whatever color you want. Your players can do the same thing as well. All right. So the next piece of this is I'm going to bring up the combat tracker. This is the next important piece of your arsenal here. And I have a limitation. I can't get it any more narrow than it is. So what I'm going to do is right click on the dice tower and move this over a little bit. And I'm going to right click on the actual chat window and stretch it to where it lines up with the combat tracker. And then I'm going to move this over. And then now I have like a little grouping here. So if you want a longer sentence, or you want more text to display, make that wider. And then I'm just going to set the dice tower right here next to it and lock it. So when I roll in the chat, that's when you get the dice results. If you roll outside, like I just showed, if I dropped it on the combat tracker with nothing on there, it doesn't do anything. Or if I drop it on the actual table, it doesn't do anything. So think of the chat area as both a text communication area and a dice tray. So use this if you can. You can also roll off your sheets, character sheets. But anyhow, this is the main chat area. I normally don't need that much chat space, so that's why I have this stretched out. You usually need more combat tracker space than chat. There is a command to clear all this stuff on the chat area. So if I do a right/clear, it will clear the chat area, so I don't have to worry about the big mess. I like keeping mine clean if I can help it. Now, you don't want to do that during gameplay. That'll anger your players if they're working on characters and such. But when you're doing stuff yourself and you need that clear, that's the command for it. It kind of drives me bananas. I'm kind of OCD about that. Okay, so I'm kind of working towards how I would set up my table. Now, the next thing is going to assume that you have built characters. I'm not going to go over character creation. That is a whole nother topic. But if you click on the characters button or the section or the group over here on the right, it'll bring up the character window. These characters that I have in place are part of the Lost Mine of Phandelver module. They're pre-gens. I manually assign these images to go with them. But when you bring up a character sheet, this is what it looks like. You have your page for the main page. There's the skills page. There's the features and such for that class and race in the background. Any inventory associated with this character would be here. Your notes is basically your background, and is your actual stats for your racial stuff and anything that goes with your background. The log sheet, this is for Adventures League. So if you play Adventures League, you can create a new log. So if I click this plus button, it brings a drop down, which is probably a new module or a new session that I'm in. And if you click this button here, you can record your Adventure League stuff. And then you have, of course, the Actions tab, where all the magic happens. So generally, you want the character sheets for the characters as well to be on this mode down at the bottom of the sheet here, where the mode and display are. And that's combat and actions. And then, as you can see, I have this character kind of pulled out and stretched out. So I would have this up and ready for me when I'm GMing. So if I need to help this player, I can. So if you come up with a schema like this where you can help your players much easier, this is the way to go. So again, I just stack them all together on this on the side thing of the combat tracker. But the main thing is now to get the characters on the combat tracker. This is the first step. So if you drag them over, and you can only do one at a time, there's no way to do it as a group that I know of. And then you can drag and drop those guys on here. So you drag them from the character selection window over to the combat tracker. That's the first step. The next step, depending on what you're doing, is to also put them on the party sheet. So the party sheet is in the interface on the top right corner, which looks like 3 people standing together. So if I click on that, this is the party sheet. This is where you have an overall view of your group. This is where you assign, award, and track different items such as parcels, a treasure, coins. You have an order sheet, which is basically a way to set up your watch order, and marching and formation, which is a basic map to kind of get you in case you need to do theater of the mind or something like that. And then, of course, XP is where you award encounters, like combat encounters and such, or quest items, which are like milestones, goals, or story-based success. So those are your main tabs. So I'm going to go ahead and drag these over. Now I'm dragging these over from the little dragon icon that's on the far right. Depending on your rule set and your theme, that will change, but that's what I'm grabbing, is these on the right, not the actual tokens. So I'm going to do this and drop them on here. And as you can see, I get this overview of the party, which is really cool. This is probably one of the, besides the combat tracker, I think this is one of the best features since sliced bread. So you have all the characters now added. And as you can see, it's in no particular order. The other thing is the combat tracker is linked to the party sheet, and it will be linked to a map if you put your characters on the map. So if you remove a character from the combat tracker, it messes a lot of things up. It messes the link from the combat tracker to the party sheet and to the actual map that you're on, if you have one. So just keep that in mind. Try to keep your players on the combat tracker. Try not to make too many adjustments or deleting them and putting them back on, those sort of things. That can really mess things up. It just breaks the link between that session, so just be careful with that. So the next thing is, now that I have this party sheet here, I'm going to show you a couple cool things on this main tab. So I have an overview of the party. So up here on the right where it says armor class and perception. Those are the numbers that are stacked so that you can see them. You can see all their ability scores. You can see their hit points, their hit die, and then you can also see their saves against certain ability saves are there that you can roll from there if you have to. And then any special defenses or anything like that will be added here. Down here, you have the ability to do group rolls as far as ability checks and ability saves. And then you have skill checks, and then there's an attack option which will allow you to make a generic attack against the entire party, and you can modify it from +2 to -2. So it's kind of a tool that you can use to achieve whatever it is you're looking for. So I'm going to go ahead and just give you an example. So if I wanted the entire party to roll a perception check, I would first do the drop-down menu and pick perception. And then I would take the DC challenge rating and plug it in. So let's just say it's 11. And they have to notice a trap when they go into a room. So instead of saying, okay, everybody, roll perception, that's going to alert them that there's something coming up. So what I would do is change this little eyeball, which is on the right-hand side here by the ability or by the skill. And that changes the visibility. So the visibility is only visible to me now. There's occasions where you want everyone to see. This is the occasion where I don't. So I'm going to go ahead and click this die right here, which is right where it says skill. So this little button right here is a die roll. So I just rolled, and it rolled against everybody's perception, and it tells me who passed or failed. So the wizard passed, the cleric failed, the rogue succeeded, the folk hero failed, but the human noble succeeded. So you have this pass or fail type thing, and then you can determine through storytelling or through the results how well they did or how well they failed or however you want to do it. But this is a good storytelling tip and tool. So that's one of the things I really like about Fantasy Grounds is that, and I really like that if you come to the inventory sheet, you can hit this refresh key, which is over here on the right. If I click on that, it will tell me who's carrying what as far as the party goes for their wealth, and then also their items, so I can keep an eye on it. So that's pretty cool. And then up here, when we award treasure, it goes up here, and it can be sold as parcels. So it's a really nice tool, and I'll show that later. The order sheet, I think the watch order is going to go away. I don't think very many people use it. I heard a rumor that they might do away with that. But basically, you just set a number for whoever goes on first, second, third watch. So you can have pairs of people. So we can say that the fighter and the wizard pair up together. The human noble and the cleric pair up together. And then the rogue criminal kind of hangs out by himself. So there's 2 pairs of people on watch, and they roughly have about a 3-hour shift or so. So that's basically the way that's used. When you initially start Fantasy Grounds, there's no grid on the party sheet. The Classic, it already had the grid on there. But in Unity, you have to set it. So if you right-click on this particular area, go to Layers, and then click on Set Grid. And then just left-click and drag until you get the size you want. And then you can right-click and adjust it or whatever you need to do. There's pointers. I mean, it's kind of like a map right here. So this is just a way to kind of have an area so that you can illustrate, something that's come up that you need to show the party. Because you do have the option to show this tab and the inventory tab in the options menu. So if you go to options, and you scroll down, you'll see that there is a thing called Party Show Characters to Clients, Party Show Inventory to Clients. So they're talking about the party sheet, and then those 2 tabs you can show your group. This Experience tab and the Main tab they won't be able to see. So the next thing is I'm going to go back to the Order tab. And if you want to illustrate to your DM, or maybe the DM wants to show the party member something, and you don't really have a map for it, or maybe you just don't have time to explain it, you can bring these group individual tokens onto this area, and you can lay them out however you want. So in this case, I'm going to have the folk hero on the left. I'm going to have the human noble, kind of a knight-looking guy on the right. I'm going to have the cleric back a little bit in the middle. I'm going to have the spellcaster back a little bit. She's a wizard. And then the rogue is basically going to be scouting ahead or behind. So this is kind of my basic formation. It really doesn't have to signify anything specifically or such, but this is a good theater of the mind technique for you to kind of keep things straight, or you can share it with your party and let them interact with it and show you about where they want to go and that sort of thing. So it's more or less a tool. It's not a fancy map or anything. It's just like having a grid, like pen and paper and some graph paper, and some erasers and rulers and such. So this is kind of a good way to utilize this sheet. I use it for elevation and for depth. So if I go into drawing mode and I actually right click and go to the drawing pen, I can draw on here. So if I wanted to say something like this area down here is, let's say that's the ground, and then up here could be like the water level. If you wanted to do something like that, you can just kind of scribble something on here. And then what you could do at this point is get out of the drawing mode, or you can draw other things in here, like maybe this is there's a boat up here. And your players are actually in the boat. You could take this and just kind of use it as a scribble, like, just a way to show people what's going on. So you can set them up here and like they're in the boat, let's say. And you can use this as a way to gauge depth or height. So if you assume they're all in the boat and then you calculate the distance between the water line and the bottom of the ocean or whatever this is, that can be a way to determine distance. And then also, if you were to say that's where the clouds are and these are where they're standing on the ground, and if you have a flying character, this would help with that. So if you want to just say that each square is 10 feet or something like that, you could easily apply that as a kind of a reminder. Like if this wizard had a fly spell and each one of these squares was 10 feet, you can count up to her and decide, okay, she's that far out, so her token on the top-down map would just be pretty much static or barely moving around. But if you look at it vertically, she can be going up and down quite a bit. So that's what I use it for, is mainly for height and for depth. And then as you get into adventuring in the modules, you have embedded awards for encounters, which is, your monster encounters and such. And then your quest items are like goals, or they could be milestones or whatever quest-related items. So that's the party sheet. It's very handy. We'll use this again, but next time I want this to show up, I kind of want it down here on the bottom right. I don't want it to show up over here next time I open it. So this is another part of the setup part of the tutorial, is that you close things and you leave them where they're at, and then you can bring them back up and this will come up where you left it. So in other words, if you leave it here and you close it, it's going to show up where you left it last. So try to leave the windows where they're at. So for instance, this combat tracker, if you need the little space back here for some reason, don't drag that over, because when you bring that back up again, it's going to be in the wrong position and then you're going to have to move it back. So get in the habit of positioning your windows and closing them. Don't drag them out of the way, because that's not going to help you very much. So unless you're relocating everything, that's fine. But if once you close that, you can bring it back up with these buttons over here, or you can just close it from here and then later on bring it back up with the button. So it's really not that big of a deal. And honestly, you can drag this button down to one of the hotkeys. So down below here on the taskbar is the combat tracker. I have it bookmarked down below. If that's the case, I can just click on it. It comes right back up. If I click on it again, it goes away. So you can bookmark some of your most used tabs. The only things that can be locked on the table is this chat window, the dice tower, and this modifier section. Everything else is pretty much stationary, so unfortunately, but that's just how it goes. So if we got the combat tracker, bring that up. There it is. I want it to stay there, and I don't want it to come up in another spot. Same thing with the party sheet. I can assign this to be down here in the right corner. That's where I want it. And once I have it positioned, I'm going to bookmark the actual party sheet so that I can get to it later. So I have two shortcuts down here. I have the combat tracker and the party sheet. So this is all just setup that we're going through at the moment. So we're into the first half an hour, so we're almost done with setup. So the next thing is going to be, when you have to pass a turn, you're going to select the first person at the top in this. This doesn't have an initiative order, but it will when you roll. And you use the arrow for next actor to advance to the next turn, and it keeps track of the round. So now we're at round 1. So what you want to do here is you can take this little down arrow where it says next actor, or if you're a player, it'll say turn complete, and drag and drop it down into the actual shortcut down here. So if I drag this down arrow where it says next actor, I can put it right there, and then I can just advance the turns from there. So technically, you can put all your main shortcuts down here in the shortcut area. That makes things a heck of a lot easier. So that's part of the setup. Now I'm going to go to the library and take a look at that. And as you can see, I have basically I have a couple third-party products. I have one of Rob Tui's condition effects modules. I have Lost Mine of Phandelver, which I'm going to use to illustrate some of the DM stuff. I have the core rules loaded. I have the Sword Coast Adventures Guide maps, and then the guide itself. I have the player's version of the DM's guide, which I don't need because it's really just an extra couple classes or races at this point. So if you only own the core books, I would go ahead and load that. If you own a bunch of the others, you don't really need it. So if I go to modules, this will give me my master list of all the modules I have stored on my hard drive and my store vault. And then you have these navigation arrows to take you to the next page. You can search down here by title or by author, and then you have a filter called load filter. So if you click that, it's only going to show the modules I have loaded. So technically, I don't want the module that is the Dungeon Master's Player's Guide. I don't really need that. So I'll click on load. Now, if you want to share any of these other books, right now the conditions and effects is already shared, which is basically up here in the upper right corner. There's a little running man icon up here in the corner. So the conditions and effects adds more coding so that if you have something that isn't automated or coded yet, you can just drag and drop that onto the combat tracker. So here you have all your main conditions, which are baked into the rule set. So if you apply grapple to somebody, it'll automatically take care of all the math and the conditions for it. Like perhaps it's a negative number, or in most cases it's disadvantage or advantage. And then there's all these third-party ones that you can either create or you can go out and buy the module for it. These are for specific situations or things that you might need if it's not coded correctly in the sheet or on the NPC. And then, of course, you have the module itself. So if you open up, if you unload it, it's going to remove it from your library. If you want to share something, you can click on the right here where there's a little stop sign or a check mark. So if you click on that, that'll be player load. So that means when they load into the table and they go to the library, they'll be able to load that module. That's not a good idea for this particular module. You don't want to load your actual modules. Mostly they're going to want the player's handbook or anything that has to do with character creation. So if they're going to build characters, those books should be available. And maybe pieces of the Dungeon Master's Guide, like the magic items and stuff, those will be available. but you don't want to share the whole guide. So that's just a little tip. And then you have rule set filter and shared filters and those sort of things. So there's some filters going on here that really helps. One of the most recent changes that came up recently is the sidebar here that I'm using. So if you click on the actual options and you look down here at the bottom, on the bottom here, there's a button now called sidebar, and then there's a message of the day. So you can drag text over here, or you can just type directly. The sidebar has the things highlighted that are actually available on the right-hand side. So you have everything. You can load everything, which I probably will do for the session. You can clear it and make your own. You have a game master only. You have the play side for the players, and then you have a character creation create PC filter. So those are some presets, and then you can actually customize it the way you want. So I'm going to go to the game master, and I'm just going to enable the anything I need for running a game. These other ones are for building classes and races and for building characters. So I'm just going to keep it on the game master filter, and that's usually the default mode when you start in as the host, is you have those are set for you. One other thing that people mess with is the background decal. So if you don't like that book, you can turn this off. You can put on the generic SmiteWorks logo, or you can pick a custom one. So what you have to have an asset in your assets folder, like a graphic, and then you can actually take that graphic and assign it as your background decal now. So I'm not going to go into that right now, but basically that's how that works. There's a magic circle. That's another option. So there's a couple. Oh, there's the Lost Mine of Phandelver decal for the actual module. So there you have options. You can make your own, or you can use the ones that come with the actual theme or a given rule set. So just depends on what you want to present and what you want to show on your desktop. So I was kind of digging on that magic circle. I like the book, but it's a little bit much for me. I think it's a little busy. So I'm going to go ahead and change the decal to there we go, magic circle. If you're wondering what this theme is, this is the new Wizard desktop theme that comes from SmiteWorks. I think it's part of the paid subscription, so if you'll have to either buy it or get the subscription. Either way, you'll get a lot more access to the different themes and also some of the art packs that comes with the map tools. So that brings up a good point. If you do need to remove someone, is there a preferred way that is not to mess up the relationship? Thilgar, I don't know. I think so, but I don't recommend it. There's really no reason to move anyone from the combat tracker. However, on the party sheet, and now I'm going to use my shortcut like I had told you guys, I can remove them from there. That's probably where you want to take them off. That's in case they're not there, and if you don't want them gaining any of the awards or the experience points, you can remove them from there temporarily until your next session. That's probably the best way to do it. When you're removing from the map, it's fine. You can remove them off the map. We can right-click on them and delete them off the map. But always try to leave them on the combat tracker, especially if you have active effects. Like let's say if you're in the middle of a battle and you have active spells going on and you just stopped like right in the middle of the battle, that's not a good time to take those characters off. Okay, so the party sheet is there. Again, I'll answer most or all questions after the show. So if you have any questions, please leave them for later if you can remember, or leave them in the chat. Just type them out and I'll get back to you on it. I didn't mean to go off course, but I wanted to answer that. So this is basically how I lay out the character sheets for my party. So I'll take in each one of these sections here are these little dragon icons. If you click on them, that brings up their sheet. So what I'm going to do is just stack them all together and go to the Actions tab and make sure it's on Combat and Actions. And then I'm going to do that for all of these characters to make it simpler. So this is one of the things you're going to do to prep your table before a game, is to get this these character sheets lined up for yourself. That way, if you have to help somebody, you're not digging through and moving stuff around. That's just too much work. So there's that, and then there's that. So now when I want to call up the sheets, instead of moving them out of the way or dragging them somewhere else, I just click on these little buttons on the right-hand side, and they'll appear where you leave them. Just like that. So again, I'm pushing these little dragon icons on the right-hand side of the combat tracker. They're right down this row. And I'll do the same thing for NPCs. I'll show you that later. So anything that's involved with an encounter or anything like that, they will be shown just like this. I'll have them laid out. That way I don't have to go searching and digging around. So now that leaves me with, mostly like half of my screen over here on the right. So this is where I'll put maps and story entries and such. So this is part of my layout, my setup. So I think that's about as far as you can go as far as just the basics. Now when you actually do your module or your adventure, we're talking about a pre-made one, not the homebrew. We're not going to get into too much of the building, but let's see. How do I share only pieces of? Yeah, it's already done for you, so you don't have to worry about that. Any plans to include audio feed like in Roll20? I don't think so. I mean, that's a feature that's not on the list for Fantasy Grounds. Most of us use Discord or another type of feed to take care of it, like Zoom and such. All right, so this is basically the layout of this module. Now, some of the stuff I'm going to show you now is more preference and customization and how you want to do things. But I got to show you the relationship between the different data types. So you have the story, which is the heart of everything. You have your maps and images, which is basically your kind of your visuals, like all your images and maps and artwork. And then you have the basically the NPCs. And NPCs make up encounters. So I'm going to grab an encounter or the encounter box. So these are related. So NPCs first, and then you would put them on encounters to build up an encounter. So basically, these two are kind of go hand in hand. They are linked somewhat. And then you have items. So your items is basically another group. And then you have parcels, which is your treasure. And then finally, you have your quest items, which what I said earlier was kind of like a milestone, or you save the princess and you get the quest item for it. And then tables, which is your randomization and ways to make the game a little bit more interesting and fun. So this is how all the windows are related. Now they're all grouped together by groups. Right now, they're all set to all. So what that means is if you have it on all, you're looking at every single thing that you have loaded in your library. So if you don't want that, you need to learn how to filter each group. So in this case, for NPCs, we're going to run the Lost Mine of Phandelver. So I'm going to select that group, and that keeps it focused to this. In the encounters, same thing. I'm going to go to Chapter 1 because that's the only thing I'm going to worry about for my first couple sessions. And then for the images, I am going to basically go to the Lost Mine of Phandelver artwork. There is also a group for maps. There's a group for different categories of things, and I'm just going to use the artwork for now. For story, you have your beginning, which I'll select that. It's right before Chapter 1. It's your intro and that sort of thing, your credits and stuff you should probably look at before you run it. Tables don't come up till Part 3, but I'm going to go ahead and select that. And for quest items, they have its own group. Parcels, same thing. It has its own group. The equipment and the magic items are broken into two different groups. So I'm just going to go ahead and grab the Lost Mine of Phandelver basic materials. This is your, your standard non-magical stuff, just equipment and stuff. So these are all things that are part of a module that's built in Fantasy Grounds. So these are all the groups that are a part of the actual module. This doesn't include the character stuff. This is only the module part. So that's just a matter of, what exactly you're going to present. And you don't have these open during the game. I just need to show you the relationship. Normally, you'd only have one or two at the most. So basically, what I want to show you is in your library, when you have a module or a book loaded, you click on the book in the library, and then you get this list. So it has images, magic items, NPCs, parcels, quests. So those are all related to these actual groups. However, these are part of the reference manual. They're not exactly the same. So if I go to images, it's only showing me the images from the module, and it actually shows me all the groups of where the stuff is. So you could technically run the game from this, from the library, but you don't have the flexibility to drag and drop and unlock them and edit. So these are hard baked into the book. This is the actual part of the book. And then the reference manual is the actual reading part of it. So instead of being modular, this is actually part of the module. So this is the reference manual. If you click on the preface, it has the title and the art embedded. And this basically goes into, the adventure from the book standpoint. So anytime you buy an official content book or something that's from the store, you normally get a reference manual. So this would be great for running it around a table on a laptop or at home, because you can just read right off of here. You have navigation arrows on the bottom. So down at the very bottom of the story entry, you can go back and forth. You can skip around in chapters, and you have a search bar. So if you wanted to look up a store, you can click and type store and hit enter, and anywhere that's mentioned, like here's a storeroom, and here's a forge of spells, so you have an idea of, where, if that word appears anywhere. So there's a search engine, and then there's a navigation arrows. So the reference manual is pretty handy, and it's the actual book. So that's basically what you're paying for, is somebody has transcribed the book into a modular format and into the reference manual. So you're really getting two things in one. You're getting like all these flashcards, basically, and then you're getting the module and the books and the dice. So I think it's well worth the investment, depending on how much time and effort you want to put into it. So this is a relationship between all the different groups. They are connected by linking to each other. So like if you have a story entry and there's a table that needs to come up, you can link the table to the story entry. If there's a quest item at the end of the scenario that you need to award, that can be linked there. If there's treasure on the map somewhere and you want this to be a part of the encounter, you can link this to the map, you can link it to the story, or both, and you can even link this to the back of an NPC. So like Clark here, he has this is his stat block, but if you go to the other tab and you're able to unlock this, you can link maybe a loot table or some sort of treasure that belongs to him specifically. So it's kind of very flexible in how you can link things together and make it easier for you to use the software. So I'm going to go ahead and close most of these. This is just a demonstration of how to use the filters and what they do. There are some that are a little bit more searchable or more laid out, like items. You can search by rarity and type. Monsters are kind of the same way. So there's some have better search fields than others. So that's just a basic thing. So now what we're going to do is start getting into organizing the data to actually run the game. So I'm going to take a quick 1 second breath and just kind of chill for a second. That's a lot of data, but it's basically a way that you can use Fantasy Grounds to present your data. You can use this in parts of or instead of, you can mix and match however you want. It depends on what your rule set is. And a lot of this applies to other rules. So if you play Pathfinder or Starfinder or the basic D&D rules like the classic, this applies for most of it. So hopefully this will help you. Kind of gives you a general idea. Some of the things might be named differently, but the functionality and where it's located is very similar. So if you can get past the fact that, oh, this is D&D, and actually look at the Fantasy Grounds part of it, that's what I'm really trying to show, is how these things work together. And basically, the main takeaway is organizing your table and having it set up for Fantasy Grounds. I'm not going to get too deep into, creating maps and all the other stuff. That's all, above and beyond the lesson. I'm going to get more into, how to set this up to run a pre-made module. Homebrew stuff and building tables and all that stuff is there. The ability is there. It's just too much stuff to cover it in one fell swoop. Okay, so now I'm going to go to, basically I'm going to pull back up. Let's see, where are we at? Okay, so the story. So what I do as a game master, now you don't have to do this, but this methodology that I'm going to show you is fairly tried and true. So you can either use this notes area, which I normally use. If I don't intend to do any exporting or creating a module, I'll use notes. If I want to make my notes more permanent and I want to export them so I can use them in a different campaign, then I would use a story entry. But in this case, I'm just going to use the notes. So I clicked on the notes banner and pulled that up. And now I'm going to click on add item, or you can right click and create a new item. And I'm just going to call this session 0 notes. And that's all this is going to be, is for my session 0. So this is stuff I'm doing before I start the game. So I'm going to close the notes thing for a moment and the story. Actually, I'll leave the story. So now my notes is basically blank. I don't have anything really set yet. And then I'm going to open up the calendar. So the calendar comes with Fantasy Grounds. You don't have to use it. I use it to keep myself organized, or you can use it for in-game calendar. So you want to click on modules if you don't already have it loaded. And then just do a search for calendar. I just search CAL, like Cal, and it comes up. It's free. It comes with the software. And there is ways to make your own, but I'm not going to go into that. That has to do with extensions and kind of creating your own stuff. But so you can pick whatever world. You have Dark Sun, Ravenloft, Eberron, Pathfinder, Traveler, Greyhawk, Starfinder. There's a Ravnica. There's a Gregorian calendar that we use. So it depends on what world you're in. But it's basically a tool, is basically what this is. So I'm just going to pick the Gregorian calendar, the regular one. So once I select that, this becomes the game calendar. So you can't really go back and forth. You need to pick one. You don't have the option of bantering back and forth. So I'm going to set the calendar up now. So I'm going to pick today is the 3rd. So the 3rd of March. Or no, the 3rd of March. But you first have to also pick the year. So 2021. And once you do that, when you click in the arrow box, it will update this. So the calendar view, so it will actually be correct. Now I'm going to click on the March thing where the 3rd is. And then I'm going to put the era, which is AD, or if you're in a different game world, you can set it to whatever you want. And then I will double click on the third here, which is starting my journal entry for that day. And now if I click this set day and time, it'll set the date on the calendar and it'll put the date here. And then the time, you adjust this by clicking in the cell and rolling your mouse wheel forward or backward. So we're going to meet tonight at 8 o'clock for session 0. And then I can set this output to chat. So if I want to, I can share this with the players. So if I click on this little bubble, it will put the date out here, and the time can be output as well. I don't know how useful that is for you guys, but what I do is I take the text and I drag and drop it into the notes and the time. So now the players know what time it is, and when I share this with them, they'll be able to look this up in the calendar. So we're going to get together tonight, and if they log into the table, they can read the notes. Even if I leave the table open for them to work on their characters, they can come in here and access the player part. Now for the game master part, I am going to link my notes. So here are my notes, basically, that I'm just starting. And from here, I'm gonna actually grab the note tab or the button or the shortcut, whatever you want to call it. So that's this little button up here in the right corner. It's kind of hard to see because of the theme. So I'm going to go ahead and drag and drop that into this GM section. And this is a direct link to my notes for my session, or it could be a story entry, whatever. And then this link up on top of this diary or whatever you want to call it, or a journal, I'll drag and drop that and put that up here. So now they're both linked together, and if I close this one, I can bring it back up, or if I close this one, I can bring it back up. So I have them cross-linked just for convenience. I'm going to go ahead and close the calendar for now. And this is now available for whatever I want to do. So the players might put their notes here, whatever they want to do. So that is basically part of the notes section is the calendar. That's what I usually start with. And then when I bring up the notes for everything else, I will add whatever I need to make this more organized. So if I grab my note here, and bring this down, unlock it. It's easier to move it if you lock it, by the way. So I'm going to go through the story entries for the first part of Lost Mine of Phandelver. So I'm going to go ahead and take the introduction, or excuse me, background. So this is where it tells you the history of why things are the way they are. So I definitely want to read that. The next is the overview. So this is showing me, how the module runs from A to Z. So if you want to get a feel for the module, this is like an overview for how things are kind of shaping up throughout the adventure. So that's a good thing to read. The next thing is the adventure hook. Depending on how skilled you are, if you haven't run a game, I advise to use the adventure hook. But if you're experienced, you can do whatever you want. But this is just an idea of how to get the party together. And also gives you some of your initial information. So you can present this to the players as you play your first session. So that's that. And then there's one chapter about the Forgotten Realms. So if you're not familiar with the actual location or the setting, this is a good thing to read. Another thing I like to steal from here is on the bottom, there's a low resolution player map. So this gives me a tool to use to kind of show the players where they're at and that sort of thing. So I'm going to link this in my story notes here so that I have that available easily. And once I've done that, I've created my session 1 notes for this particular session, for session 0. So this is all the reading I'm going to do if needed. And then for this map here, I can basically use this as my kind of my reference. And as I need it, I will present it. And just to let you know that these red pins are not visible unless you right click on them and make the link shareable, then it turns green. So any links that you make on the map are not visible by the players. So the beginning part of the overview and the adventure hook tells you that some players might be from Neverwinter or the area. So they suggest that you start in Neverwinter or right outside. So I'm going to drag and drop my note right next to Neverwinter. So again, I just dragged this little dragon pin from up here on the left and dropped it on the map. So I made my own pin there. And now what I'm going to do is leave this here because this is the way I want this sized. I don't want it much bigger than this. And then I can use this zoom to fit to kind of recenter it. And then I've click on the actual map and zoom in with the rolling the mouse wheel in and out. You can zoom in to where you need to. And then once I'm done, I'm going to close this. I'm not going to move it. I'm going to close it. And if I need it again, it'll be in my notes and it will come right where I put it. So just try to get in the habit of doing that. Like once you have it somewhere you want it, then just leave it there. You don't have to move it. Just close it and create a shortcut for it. It'll pop back up. So now I'm going to take my shortcut for the notes and put it in my hotkeys below. So now if I accidentally close this, I bring up the notes, click on the map, there it is. If I want to go to my journal entry, it's right there. If I accidentally close this, I can open up the notes. So this is just a way to link things together to make them easier for you to find them and to get to them quicker. So basically this note taking is sort of like a run list. So if you know what you're going to be getting into for the next few hours, this is like a run list. So you have your schedule, you have some of your reading you need to do, and then you have a reference map to look at while you're prepping. Once you get the party together and you know who they are, and they're on the party sheet or the combat tracker, now I'm going to add them to my list here just for me. So these are my players. So I'm going to drag their little tokens onto this list here. So I just do this for me. You don't have to do this. But I'm going to go ahead and put the email address or the Discord name or whoever you have at your table on this list here so that you can find them easier and you're not trying to remember who's who. So you have this human noble, you have the cleric, you have the wizard, and I'm going to put the rogue on here. Forgot about him. So these are my players, and then I'm going to put their email address or whatever information you have on them. That way I can find them easier, and I'm not dicking around looking for them later. So I'm going to go ahead and hit Control 1. And now I am basically set for my notes, and hopefully I'll get their email addresses and their real Discord names here. And then this is the prep work I need to do. So I'll get them together. We'll go over their character sheets. We'll make sure their backgrounds kind of jive, and we might even run a little practice combat just to see how things are. And then we're going to schedule for our next session, which is when we actually start playing. So this is just the session 0 part of things. So this is just a suggestion. You don't have to do it this way. This just makes it so that when you play that you have an organized method of doing this. So if you create your own methodology, it gets so much easier than just running off the seat of your pants all the time. So a little prep isn't bad. And this is just drag and drop. There's not a whole bunch of editing and that sort of thing. So now I know what I need to pick up on, and I know the locations, and I have ways for referencing and such. So now I'm going to go ahead and set up for session 1. And I'm actually going to show a little bit of the combat and such, and then we'll call it a day. So I'm going to go ahead and close the session 0 notes. And I'm going to bring up the notepad again. And I'm going to call this is going to be Lost Mine of Phandelver session 1. So that is basically how this goes. If you want it to be more in order, like you don't see it if it's going out of order, you can put 00.0 so that it will go into a specific order if you want. I'm not too concerned about it. They're just notes. So players can make their own notes, and if they click on public, they can share their notes with others. So yes, players have access to notes and they can share it. The game master can always see the notes, but the other players cannot unless it's made public. So there is a way that you can make notes available and usable in your sessions. So now what I'm going to do is start setting up for the first session. So the next thing I'm going to do is talk to my group. Hey, when are we going to play? Or they're going to ask me that probably. So we're on Wednesday now. So let's go with Saturday or Sunday at noon. So I'm going to double click. I'm going to set the calendar by clicking on the arrow. And now I can send that data out into the chat. So in the player view, I'm going to go ahead and drag and drop the date. And we're going to play around the same time. So I'll just leave the time as it is. And then for me, for the game master, I'm going to link my session 1 notes to this calendar entry. So this is basically building off of what we talked about before for session 0. So for session 1, I'm only going to focus on a certain amount of areas in the game. So when you play, you kind of, if you do it in chunks, it's a lot easier than looking at the whole thing. It can get overwhelming. It's good to have an idea of what should happen, but I don't think you need to know every little single detail unless you're that way, because it's really unnecessary. I think if you focus on just the 4-hour thing and maybe a little ahead of that, that's about all you need to do. So I'm going to take and first of all, I'm going to go through the story here. So bring that back up, and I'm going to filter it to chapter 1. And in here are some story entries. So there's an index, which I want to put up there so I can skip around. There's the beginning where the Goblin Arrows chapter is. So this is when they leave Neverwinter. And then there's the ambush itself, which is like their first main combat. And then there's the Cragmaw hideout. So if they get to the hideout by the end of the session, you're doing good. It might take you a couple sessions to go from Neverwinter to this combat or to this hideout. That's fine. There's no rush. But this is all I'm going to prepare for right now. I'm not going to worry about all this other stuff yet. I'm just going to worry about this. This is my session 1. So if they could get from Neverwinter to this combat, and then if they find the hideout, that's a good day. But sometimes you have slower groups, or maybe you want to make something up along the way to test the party, whatever. It might take you a couple times, but should take 1 or 2 sessions to get from Neverwinter to the Cragmaw hideout. That's basically like a goal, or even a something that you want to foster and try to get them to that point. The next thing I'm going to do is link the map again. Even though I have it, I don't know how many times I've got to the point where, I lost my map or whatever, and it just drives me nuts. So I like to have them linked all over the place so I don't lose it. Now that I have this set up, now I want to take a look at the content and, that sort of thing. So between Wednesday and Sunday, I have a little bit of reading to do. And I'm going to be setting up for the first encounter and the rest of the table. So if you're going to run this Saturday, you kind of want to read through some of this stuff, and you kind of want to be prepared. So I'm going to go ahead and look at Chapter 1, which is the index. And like I said, it goes all the way up to the cave. It's probably about as far as you want to go, unless you're, a marathon gamer. And then this beginning part explains when they leave Neverwinter and who hired them, and it gives you tips on how to make players role play and get to know each other, or at least to show them, the way. And then I'm going to stretch this where I want to be able to read it, so I don't want it too low. And this is where I'm going to leave this. I'm not going to move this out of the way because I definitely want to use this space as more efficient as I can. And then as you go through here, you can use the navigation arrows on the bottom. So that'll take you to the next page. Instead of, if you click on like part 3 here, it's going to bring that up. So what you want to do is use the arrow, and you'll have the same pop-up, but it'll be in the same frame or the same size. So I think this is where people get a little confused. So if you click on these from the story entry area or anywhere like that, it's just going to pop up a new window. If you go to the beginning of the chapter and then you use the arrow keys, you can go back and forth. You can leave your window the way you want it sized. So that's an important thing to remember. And then I don't have to move this too much. So once you have it set, you shouldn't have to move it. Now, if I want to get back to this map, you just click on it. It brings it to the forefront. So there's no worry about covering things up, because all you have to do is touch somewhere, and it'll bring up the screen that you want, or the section. So in here, it says that there is an ambush that comes up. So it's near the end of your journey from Neverwinter to Phandalin. Well, at least 2/3 of the way there. It says read the following box text to start the encounter. So if you're using Fantasy Grounds, you can click on this box text, and it will send the text out as the game master. You can have another player read this for you, or you can read it or paraphrase it, or you can just read it right out of here. It says, you've been on the Triboar Trail for about half a day. As you come around a bend, you spot 2 dead horses sprawled about 50 feet ahead of you, blocking the path. Each has several black-feathered arrows sticking out of it. The woods press close to the trail here, with a steep embankment and dense thickets on either side. And then it tells you, if you're using the Meet Me in Phandalin adventure hook, that somebody in the party might recognize the horses, and that the horses belong to Gundren Rockseeker and Sildar Hallwinter, whom are the people who rode ahead of you the night before, and they assigned you to escort a wagon from Neverwinter to Phandalin. So it tells you the horse have been dead about a day, and it's clear that the arrows killed the horses. When the characters inspect the scene closer, read the following. And when the adventurers go up to the horses and they start looking at the stuff, there's an empty saddlebag and a leather map case. So if you click on that, that'll go into the chat. And then it tells you to spring the encounter. It gives you the details of how the encounter should go. And then if there's any developments, like if you capture one of the goblins, you can avoid some traps, and you can get some more reconnaissance and detail on the Kragma hideout. And then there's a little section here on the Goblin Trail. So from when you leave the road to the Goblin hideout, the Kragma hideout, there's a couple traps along the way. However, if you rescued or kept one of the goblins as a friend, or at least as a captive, they can help you avoid the traps. And then at the end, you have the story award or the quest award of 300 that you will award your players. So this is basically the hard part of it, or the most work part of it. Everything else is mainly just role playing and having fun and explaining what the environment looks like and those sort of things. So it's just a matter of your play style. Okay, so the next step is, let's see, we're going to get another thing set up here. So we have the story entries and we have the character sheets. Now we need to figure out how are we going to handle this combat. So it doesn't provide any maps. It just says encounter trail maps. Or trail traps. There's the traps. There's no map there. And then if you go to the goblins, there's a link about what they should know as far as information. And then when you go to the actual adventure, there's the encounter for the goblins, but there's nowhere to put them. There's just it's a theater of the mind thing. They had this set up for where the game master and the players would exercise their creativity as opposed to throwing a map down. So if that's how you want to run it, theater of the mind, you could totally do that. So if I bring up the encounter at the given moment that this comes up in the story, I can hit the down arrow or click on the down arrow, and it will add the goblins as enemies, and they're not visible yet. So there's this little eyeball next to each entry, and then there's a master eyeball up here which shows all or hides all. So you can unveil them one by one, or you can do it all at one time. Depends on what's going on. So that's one way to do it. And then you would run all your encounters out of the combat tracker. So the goblins already have their initiative. However, if you notice, they're all the same hit points, all the same initiative. That's by design. So if you go to the options, there is a way to change that. So I'm going to actually remove the goblins to illustrate that. So I'm going to go to menu, and I'm going to click on the garbage can. Now this is on the bottom of the combat tracker on the frame. And then you have an option, delete only foes or delete all non-friendly. So that would be neutral and the bad guys. So we're just going to do the foes. And the reason I'm doing this is to show you the difference. So when I first put them on there, they all had 16 for their initiative, and they all had like 7 hit points. So to mitigate that, if you don't want that to be the same every time, you can go and scroll down to combat on the options. And when it says add auto NPC initiative, right now it's set to group. So if I had 4 goblins and a boss, the boss would go on his own initiative, and then the 4 goblins would go on their own. So it breaks it into groups. If you turn it off, that means you have to roll manually, and you can do that. There's tools to roll for the whole group or for all the NPCs or both or all. That's an option. And then there's the option of on, which means it'll automatically roll for their initiative, but each one of their initiatives will be different. So that's one thing that you can do. Also the numbering, it's on append. So when you add them, it'll go 1 through 4. But if you don't want your party to measure the strength of the encounter, to cut down metagaming, you can change random. And what that does is when you add them to the combat tracker, it'll say like 4 of 11. And your party members will be shaking in their boots. They're like, oh, there's 11 of them. But that doesn't mean there's 11 in the area, though. So, leave it up to players to assume things. And then NPC roles, variable or fixed. So this more has to do with the stat block. So when you have damage, like for instance, these guys have scimitars, the damage is 1d6 plus 2. The average is 5, rounded up. So it was a 4 rounded up to 5, I guess. So 1d6 plus 2 slashing damage. If you turn this on to fixed, they'll always do 5 points of damage. If you do variable, that's when they're rolling just like normal. So that's by default on variable, but you can have fixed or variable depending on what you want it to do. I like variable, but if you want to measure or know how many hits it's going to take your party down, that's a good way to control. So basically, if you know they're always going to do 5 points of damage after 2 hits, most of these characters are going to go down. So that's why that's a good thing. But at the same time, it's just a way to control the game somewhat. But that's up to you. I don't normally use that, but it's a tool to use. And one last thing is their hit points. So if you go to house rules and you change the combat tracker NPC hit points from standard to maximum or random, their hit points will be random as well. So I'm going to leave it on random, and they're going to have different initiatives too. So that's why I changed those settings. You can play with those as you need it. So now the goblins, when you add them, they'll have different numbers and different things to do. I'm going to roll initiative for the party just to show you where that's at and also to set it. So I'm going to go to menu on the bottom of the combat tracker, which is this little menu down here but next to the down arrow. So it's right down here on the bottom left. When you click that, you have close window. You can delete things from the tracker. You can delete all the effects. You can roll initiatives, and you can do your rests. So you have a long and a short rest. In initiative, you have clear all initiatives. You have roll PC initiatives, roll NPC initiatives, or roll all. I'm just going to roll the PC initiatives since I don't have anyone connected. Normally they would do that, but I don't have anyone on the table at the moment. So I'm just going to roll for their initiatives manually right now from here. And you can see it's reshuffled the order, so it tells us who goes first. Now I'm going to add the goblins to the combat tracker by clicking on the down arrow. So as you can see now, they don't all go together. I mean, there's little groups here. It looks like it randomized the hit points a little bit and some of the initiative order. So that's what you want if you want a little bit more flexibility. But sometimes people like to run it in groups, so it's easier for them to remember. I kind of like the variety. That's just my choice. So I'm going to reset the rounds, and I'm going to reset the initiatives. So I'm going to go back to the initiative, and the circle that says clear all initiatives. If I do that, it resets this back to round 1. So it was going to round 2, and I just wanted to show you those functions. And then if you go to menu and you see this eyeball with a lock on it, that's rest. So you can pick short rest or long rest. I'm going to do a long rest just in case. That way all the party members are reset in case they have things that are already done. And then I'm going to take and remove the goblins for now because I'm going to handle this theater of the mind thing differently. So technically what you can do is bring up the party sheet or the actual thing here, this actual stat block for your player, and you can drag and drop. So if I wanted to, I can drag his weapon on top of one of these goblins, depending on which one's close. And that will roll the attack roll, and in this case I missed, so the goblin probably ducked underneath my great sword. So that's basically, how it would go, and then you would use the next actor or turn complete to go to the rogue, bring up his tab, and do his thing. So maybe he wants to target or he wants to shoot his bow at one of the other goblins, so he can drag and drop on a different one. And he also missed, so they're kind of sucking right now. But he used up an arrow on his sheet, so that's something that Fantasy Grounds will keep track of. So that's one way to do it. And then for the NPCs, when it comes to their turn, it will drop down their features, so they have nimble escape, where they can get away pretty easily without an opportunity attack. There's a scimitar and a short bow. So I can just drag and drop this attack roll on one of the players and roll and see what it comes up with. Well, he missed too. So this is how you would run Theater of the Mind combat, is you can do everything pretty much off the character sheets and the combat tracker. You don't need a map strategically in this case. So I'm going to go ahead and, again, I'm going to click on the menu. I'm going to click on delete from tracker and only the foes. So I'm going to get rid of all the goblins. I am going to go to menu and initiative, and I'm going to clear all the initiatives. And then I'm going to go to menu and rest, and I'm going to do a long rest to reset everything. So now back at round 1, and I don't have any combatants on here. So this is kind of how I reset. And then I'm going to clear the chat. So we're nice and clean and ready to go. So the other alternative way of handling this is either you can bring in your own map, you can design a map in the map tools, or you can use something like a photo of any sort if you want. So it really depends on how much you want to put into it and how much assets you have and how much time you have. So if you don't have a lot of time, just grab any photo. It doesn't even matter really what it is. So what I'm talking about is I need something that I can place the NPCs and the characters on. I mean, I can even put them on this map if I want to. And as a matter of fact, since I'm here, I'm going to link my session 1 notes to the map. So I'm just going to drop it right outside of Neverwinter. That way, if I accidentally close this, it's right there. And then the goblin ambush, I'm going to bring up the goblins and think about how I want to place them. So this is something you can do ahead of time so that it's very smooth when you're playing, instead of just kind of ad hoc. This is kind of what I was doing earlier, is just bringing up some monsters from an encounter and throwing them on there and just kind of going back and forth. That's kind of the quick and dirty way to do it, and that's the theater of the mind style. But if you want something more strategic or something more colorful or more immersive, you can certainly pick any type of image or map that you want. In this case, when I go to images, I looked at this cover and I was like, I'm not going to use that. That gives away stuff. Then I saw this picture of the goblins. I was like, oh, that'd be cool to share with the party, like right before or after the ambush. So I'm going to go ahead and link this to my notes. And it's an image, so I know that, it's a shareable image. To share an image with anyone, you right-click on the link up here on the left, and then you click sharing, and then you click share record. And what it does is it creates this little letter P, which means public, on the goblins here. That means that image is shared. Once you're done with it, if you don't need to go back to it, you just come in here and click on the public and it goes away. Now you could filter it by sharing. So if you have a bunch of images shared, you can click on this all button, and all the images that are shared will have a letter P next to it. And at that case, you can just unclick them or uncheck them. And that cuts down on resources that's shared with your players. So you want to make sure that that's managed as you go. Don't wait till the very end to fix it. So that is basically one of the images I want to use for immersion. And then I saw this trail picture, the Triboard Trail, and I said, hey, that's pretty nifty. So I'm going to go ahead and stretch this image out more. I'm going to use this for my battle map. So I really don't need a battle map per se. I can use this image. So if you can unlock it, in some cases you can't, it might be protected. But either way, you can edit it or whatever you want. But you should still be able to put a grid on it, and that's what I'm looking to do. So I use the drop-down toggle toolbar, and I'm using this zoom to fit, which is these arrows. And that kind of places this in a place where I want it. And then I'm going to stretch this out to where I want it to be. And then if I want to zoom in, I just click anywhere on the map and just roll my mouse wheel forward and back, depending on what I want to do. And then I'm going to click on the grid over here, which is going to allow me to assign a grid to this. And then I'm going to click on visibility, and that turns on the grid. And I think this is a pretty good size. I'm going to go with 60 though, so you can adjust the grid size. There we go. So it's a little bit bigger, not as small. And then if you don't like this big, thick gray line, you can go to the color picker and select a more, favorable color. And then you can fade it out by the alpha channel so that if you want it to still show but not be as aggressive, you can do that, and that way when you're looking at this, it's not so crazy. So this is going to be the battle map that I want to use for this encounter. So it's really not a map, it's just a kind of a theater of the mind kind of thing, but it gives you the ability to have some more immersion too. So the picture goes along with the story. Because you see that it says you've been on the trail for half a day. As you come around a bend, the only thing is you don't have the dead horses, but other than that, it looks pretty good. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to link the encounter to this image. So the goblin ambush is now linked to the map, and I'm going to bring up my notes again. And my notes are basically for session 0. What I'm going to do with these are session 1. Yeah, I don't want session 0. Session 0 is over. I'm going to go to notes and go to my session 1 notes. And then I'm going to link those to the toolbar or the hotkeys. And I'm going to link them to the map I want to use. And I'm going to take this map and link it to the notes. And then I'll put a little note here, battle map. So that way I remember. And then at this point, I'm even going to go so far as to take this map here. And I want to link this to this map. So this is the only time you're going to have to really move maps. So I'm going to move this over, because if I click on one and the other, it buries the other one. And then I'm going to drag and drop this whole thing into this trail area down here on the map. So now I have everything's kind of linked together. And now I'm going to put this back where I had it. There we go. So there is the start of this encounter. So right now I'm just building up to the point where I can run this. So this is kind of an overall view of the picture of the trail. It's really not tactical, but you can use your theater of the mind a little bit easier. So now what I'm going to do is I want to set up the encounter. So I'm going to pull up one of my shortcuts that I had. Here's the ambush. So this is an ambush. This is not a random encounter. And if you read this, it says that you're going to see if the goblins get a jump on the party for basically for their surprise. So the party may not know they're there. So I'm going to bring up the stat block, and it shows a stealth of +6. So you can resolve this before or during play. I usually do it before. So I just grab and drag this, and I'll drop it in the dice tower. And I'll get a result of 14. So I know now that this 14 is the number that the party members have to beat in order to notice the goblins. So that's just a kind of a starting point. And then if I wanted to go to passive perception, like I was showing you earlier on the party sheet, I can look on here and only, let's see, now that beats everyone on here. So that would mean that they win surprise. However, if I wanted to be nice and give the party a chance to roll, or at least one of them to notice, I will set the DC challenge rating to 14, and I'll just make a hidden roll either before the game or even during. And then this will tell me pass or fail. So it looks like the rogue figured it out, and that's about it. But he was also scouting. So he might be able to tip the party off and cancel out the whole thing. So that's a kind of a cool way to run it. So it depends on how you want to do it. But being that the goblins had beat their passive perception right off the get-go, is kind of up to you how you want to handle it. You can actually kill your party off. So be careful with this encounter, because it's actually balanced. So depending on your experience of your group and their level, that would determine if you're going to actually use this as an ambush, or just kind of make it feel like an ambush, but it really isn't. So then it says you got to see who's surprised, and if anybody was surprised, which they all would be, these basically the goblins would go first. You use the initiative to find out who goes first and whatnot. So I wouldn't even set the initiative if I was going to run this, if I was going to allow the ambush. When the time comes, the goblins act. 2 of them will rush forward with melee attacks. The other 2 will stand about 30 feet away and use their missile weapons. When 3 goblins are defeated, the last one will flee, heading to the goblin trail. So that's kind of how they want you to run it. So what I will do is open up the pin here for the encounter again. And you can drag and drop each individual token to this map. So I'm going to put number 1 kind of down here off to the side of the road. I'm going to put number 2 over here off to the side of the road, kind of hiding behind the bushes here. I'm going to put number 3 up here behind the tree or in the tree, and this guy over here behind this rock or this tree, however you want to look at it. And make sure that the tokens are in a square. So that's basically where they're going to be when this encounter starts. And as you can see, it's checked off on here. If you uncheck this, they will no longer be linked to the encounter. So just leave them as they are. And when you close this, they disappear, but they'll be ready when this comes up. Now the next thing is I'm going to place the party ahead of time on the map. So you can do it one at a time, or you can take this little face down here, or it might be a dragon head or a helmet, and drag all the friendlies at once. It doesn't put them on there in a specific order, but at this point I'm going to arrange them as I had on the other sheet. So I had, let's see, this was the folk hero is over here, the noble fighter is on the left, the dwarf was here, the acolyte was here, and then the rogue was probably scouting ahead or somewhere else off to the side. But anyways, so this is the starting position for these guys or girls. So this is just a preliminary setup. So when I share this map by right-clicking and hit share and share record, it'll show me a little status icon on the bottom left corner of the map frame as to who has the image. If I wanted to show this to the rogue ahead of time, I could drag this little icon up here on the top left to a specific player, and it would only show for that player. So it depends on who's at your table and the timing and such. But I could have shared this little scene ahead of time, or a map with the rogue if he was scouting ahead, or maybe the ranger. So you can share it individually, or if you right click on it and click sharing, you can share with the whole group. You can stop sharing, depends on what you need. So now I want to make this even more immersive. So I'm not going to get too deep into this, but I want to put a little mist in here to kind of make it spooky. So I'm going to unlock the map. I'm going to click on the effects button here, and down on the bottom is an add effects layer. So I'm going to add a layer, and then I need to select what is on that layer. So in this case, I'm going to go to mist. And as you can see, the mist is on the map, so I'm going to turn it down a little bit, and the speed is way too fast. So I'll go ahead and turn that down a little bit. So you can go right to make it go left, and you can go left to make it to go right. But in the center is the slower aspect of it. So it's still moving. I turn this up just a little bit so it's actually visible, and it's actually creating fog or clouds outside of this map area. So in order to deal with that, I'm going to enable a mask which covers everything. And then I'm going to click the reveal area, and I'm only going to reveal the map itself. And the rest of it can just stay where it is. So now that confines the mist into this area. So now you kind of have a cool looking immersive map. It has a little movement to it. Nothing fancy, just kind of a way to kind of spruce things up. So that's basically how this is going to play out. And this is their setup. I did a little extra here. This is not necessary, but it's kind of nice to do this, especially with Unity. Just remember, the more of the stuff you activate, the harder it is on people's machines. So just try not to put too many effects or things on layers if you can help it. Just one or two is probably effective enough. And especially when they get the new site going, that's going to really creep up the power that you're going to need. Okay, so the next step is, now I have this pretty much set. This is what I want. Everything is pretty much in place. So once I'm done with this setup, I'm going to come over to the bottom left corner where the chat window is, and I'm going to type a right slash, and I'm going to type the word save and hit enter. Now, Fantasy Grounds will save every 4 or 5 minutes, but there's no way to know when it's saved. You can have a lot of things happen in less than a minute. So I went ahead and saved it. That way, no matter what, it's there, it's ready to go. The other thing is, let's see, there's session 1 notes. Okay, so when you come back to the table, let's say you had a break and you were done for the day. When you come back on, that's pretty much what you're going to see. So don't panic. There's your party sheet. There's your combat tracker, right where you left it. Here's your session 1 notes. You can go down this list. Bring everything up where you want to leave it. So it's kind of a nice thing to have that functionality. Then for the characters, you just click on the combat tracker, it brings them up. So it's really simple to get right back to where you were. A lot of people struggle with that, and they keep moving things around. If you leave them where they're at or where you want them, you're not gonna have that issue. So basically, that is the setup. I think I'm going to take a quick 1-minute break, and then we'll talk about running this encounter. And that's pretty much a majority of what you need to know for a basic pre-made module. Now, you can build tables and do all kinds of customization and stuff. We're not going to get into that today, but we're basically going to wrap this up with a short little piece of the combat. And that should do fairly well to get you started. So I will be back in a minute. All right. So now we're going to resolve part of the combat. We're not going to go through the whole thing, but I want to show you this. So the party members are here. They've come up to the area where the horses are, and they're getting ready to investigate the horses. So if you read it, it tells you that the horses are dead. So what's going to happen here is they stop, they see the dead horses, they look around. The cleric in the group, the dwarf, he offers to go investigate the horses, and he's got a medical background, so he's going to use his ability to take a look at the look at the area. It says investigation, so why don't we use investigation to see what he can find? So he kind of walks over to the, I'll say he walks up about 10, 15 feet. Now, by default, the tokens are locked for players. If you're the game master, you have to hold down the Alt key to emulate their movement. So if I hold down the Alt key and I drag the token, it's going to show how far he moved. I'll leave it like that for now in case he wants to go back. But if you want to approve the movement, you click the arrow, and that would be how you track it. So that's more of a mental thing. It's not going to count down or anything. So he's moved 15 feet, so he has 10 more feet of movement because of his dwarven size. He only gets 25 feet. So he's moving up here to check a look at the horses. He bends down, or he stoops down, or kneels down next to one of the horses. And what he does is he kind of examines it and takes a look. He kind of barely touches the flesh. He really takes a look at it, and he says something like, well, he's like, contemplating. So he's going to roll his medicine check and have him do it in the dice tower. So the player would just take this and drag and drop it in the dice tower. And he rolled a total of 9, so that's not really quite what I'm looking for at least a 10. So he says, well, the damn things are dead. And he looks around, and he doesn't really notice anything else. But then he notices the saddlebags and says, oh, wait, there's some saddlebags over here, and looks like a pouch or something. So he starts to head that way, and once that happens, the goblins come out. So this is basically when the actual fight starts. So when that happens, I bring up the goblin ambush, and they're already pre-placed. Click the down arrow. Now they show up on the map, but they're not visible yet. By default, they're not visible. And they're not visible in the combat tracker yet. So they already have their initiatives here. And if they won that the surprise round, they definitely have, most of them would be surprised. So I'm going to go ahead and run it that way. So I'm going to come up here to this goblin number 9, but it's not really number 9 because there's only 4 goblins. Remember, I changed the settings. So he's up here. It highlights, or it makes this token kind of a white color. So he's going to pop out of the woods, and he is going to pull out his bow and take aim at this fighter. So if you want to target somebody that's a distance away, you can do so. So if you hold down the right control key, and then you click on the target. So I clicked on the token first, then I hold down the right control key, and I click on the actual target. So I clicked on the goblin first, then I hold down the right control key, then I click on his target. And if you look in the combat tracker, it says targets, cleric, soldier. Or in this case, if I want to untarget it, because he didn't want to target that guy yet, I could just click on it again and repeat the process. It removes the target. So when you target something, if you plan on changing targets, or if your target dies, you need to untarget that person or the individual or whatever it is. In this case, he wanted to do the fighter folk hero. So now the folk hero is targeted. All I have to do now is first I'm going to reveal him because he's come out of his hiding spot. So now he's visible to the party. I'm going to double click on his bow, and it says range 80 to 30 or 80 to 320 feet. He's well within range. But if you mouse over, it'll show the distance. So he's only about 25 feet away. So then all I have to do is double click the attack roll. It rolled against his armor class as far as numbers go, and it reported that it's a miss. So with that in mind, I'll describe it. I'll say, well, he raises his bow, he comes out of the bushes, he's so excited about this combat, and he says something in Goblin, and he shoots, and it goes right over your head. So that's basically a big miss. He has a nimble escape, which is he can disengage or hide. So he's going to disengage or hide. So he's going to move back, and he's going to hide. So I'm going to roll his, basically his stealth roll would be you can. Depends on how you want to do it, but basically he's hiding right now. So that's his turn. And then I'm going to click the next actor, or in the place of a player, it would be the turn complete. So now one of his brothers goes down here. He's one of the ones that's hiding in melee range. So he also comes out, and I need to hold down the Alt key. And as you can see, I don't have to move diagonally. I can move, linear. So that's his movement. That gives him 10 feet left if he wants to take off. And then I'll hit and approve it. Once he's in range, he is going to just drag and drop the attack on the token or on the combat tracker. So what I'm saying is he's going to use a scimitar, just drag and drop the die from his attack roll right on top of the enemy, or the character in this case. He rolled a 12, and he has a bonus of +4. That's 16, so that hit. So that's one way to do the attack roll. The other would be to drag and drop it into his entry in the combat tracker. So if I take the same attack roll and drag and drop it here on the combat tracker, it's going to roll, and this is an automatic miss for the 1. So anyway, so that's how you do the attack roll. Well, I'm going to give him the first roll. That was a really good roll. So I'm going to say that he did actually hit. So I'm going to take the damage, and I can either drag it here or I can drag it on the token. I'll just put it in the combat tracker for ease of use. Ouch. So he took heavy damage, and you can see there's a little dot. It's kind of hard to see it, but there's a little dot next to there that shows it's heavy. And then the goblin is still green, so he's healthy. And also up here on the combat tracker, there are things like this wound category. Maybe the color will change at some point. It depends on how much. If he takes more than 6, I think it's gonna it stays red. But if it's less than 6, it'll be yellow or green. So that's kind of like the status thing, almost like a game or video game sort of. But that's basically his turn, and now he's going to disengage, so he can move 10 more feet. And that's his turn. So that's a bonus action that he can take for being a goblin. So he just kind of went out of range. And that's his turn. So then this goblin here might just attack the cleric. So he's going to move out of his hiding position. So I'll reveal him. He's going to target the cleric, and I'm holding down the right control key. So first I click on the goblin, I hold down the right control key, and then I click on the soldier, the cleric soldier. He's actually a cleric. And then I'm going to execute the attack roll on the combat tracker on his entry here, and it's the ranged short bow attack. So he missed. So he shot at the cleric and missed. And that cleric goes, "God damn it!" He says, "I hate goblins." So he's all upset. And like I said, if you mouse over, you can see the range. So the goblin is going to move back. He still has movement left, and he's going to hide as his bonus action. So he just popped out, took a pop shot at him, and went back in. And he was kind of cussing and goblin. He's kind of making a fuss about his miss. The next guy, he's going to be a little bit more stealthy. When you move stealthily, you can only move half your movement rate. So he's going to sneak up on the party. So he's crawling on his belly with a scimitar. So I'm going to move 15 feet. And as you can see, I have these waypoints. You don't have to make those, but that's basically when you stop. And you can move waypoints if you have to go around things, but pay attention to the overall movement. So he's actually 15 feet, and I'm going to roll a stealth check. So I can double click on the token, and that brings up a stat block. So when we do that, I want to stack these over here just like I did with the players. So as you bring up their stat blocks, just stretch them out, just like the players. And now he's going to roll his stealth. I'm rolling in the dice tower just so no one sees it. Okay, so he rolled a total of 7. So he thinks he's hiding or being sneaky, but he didn't beat the passive perception of the group. The average of this group is like 12 or something like that. So, and you can find that in the party sheet. So if you look at this list, this bottom number, everybody here is a 13 except for the rogue. So that's basically, you know, he rolled way under that. So he's probably making more noise than he realizes. So that's his turn, basically. He was trying to be sneaky, and he ended up making more noise. All right, so this fighter is hurt. So he has a couple things I want to enable. First of all, he has an effect called Fighting Style Archery. So if I turn that on, this would basically give him a +2 to his attack rolls permanently, unless I remove the effect. And then he has an ability a one time or once per rest called Second Wind. So if I click on it, it's going to heal him. And then once I've used it, there's a little bubble next to it. So here on the very left, next to Second Wind, is a bubble. So once I use it, it disappears off his sheet. He's feeling a lot better. He doesn't have as much damage. Only has 1 point of damage now. And that was a bonus action, so he doesn't have any more bonus actions. But he's going to go ahead and target this guy that tried to hurt him. And this token, number 8, should be revealed, and which it is. So this guy disengaged, so he's just going to take out his longbow. And again, I clicked on the soldier, and then I'm going to hold the right control key down. I'm going to click on the goblin. And as you can see here, he has himself targeted, so we don't want that. So now he's only got the goblin targeted. So now on his sheet, all I have to do is double click on the attack roll. It took off one of the arrows, and it was a hit because of his bonuses. It was 10 + 7. So he hit the goblin probably square in his back. And now I'm going to double click on the damage. He did 11 points of damage. So this character, this NPC, is dying. So on the combat tracker, up here on this line, it says unconscious. And on the right, it actually shows the little icon. So it's up to you if you want to remove them or not. I usually take them off unless they're like a boss, or maybe there's a chance that they're going to be healed. So if that's the case, I'd leave them on. But in this case, I'll just delete the entry. So I do that by double clicking, and now he's no longer on the battlefield. And it takes less time to go through the combat tracker when you do remove those. So that was his turn. The rogue, basically, he would probably be able to go at this point, or whoever. So if I want to do the rogue's turn, just to show you, he has the brave advantage against frightened, so that's something I would put on there. It's mainly a note. And then he has this halfling nimbleness and naturally stealthy, so he can hide behind his party members. So that's basically what he's doing, essentially. This goblin down here thinks he's being sneaky, but the rogue is pretending like he doesn't see him, but he actually does. And he's going to do a sneak attack on the goblin. So he is going to be hidden behind the wizard or one of his allies. So he's within 5 feet. And he's basically going to target the goblin. So again, I'm going to hold down the right control key, make sure the rogue is selected, and click on there, and basically hold down the right control key. Okay. There we go. So I had to make sure I clicked on the rogue, and then I have to make this guy visible because he's basically not hidden. So this guy is going to take a shot at him with his bow, and if he succeeds, then I'll apply the sneak attack effect. So I'm going to double click on the attack roll, and he missed. So he ruined his opportunity for the sneak attack, went right over the back of the goblin, and the goblin is like, huh? So he basically squandered his turn there. So the wizard, she has some spells here, and she has Fey ancestry, so I'm going to enable that. That's part of her elven heritage. She has some cantrips, and she has some first level spells. So she's going to use a first level spell. So I'm going to click one of her slots, and she's going to use magic missile. She gets 3 of them. These automatically hit, so she's going to shoot this guy a couple times. So there's 2. And then I'm dragging it over. And he's dead. So 2 missiles went off and he's dead. And then the third one, she's going to shoot this guy here, the one that shot at the cleric. Yep, so she wounded him. So she used her magic missiles, and now she's going to move over here to the right and up. So she has a little bit of cover. This goblin here is dead. So I'm going to double click on him and remove him. And as you can see, this is going in favor of the party. I didn't do the sneak round because I don't have time for it. But basically, the goblins all would have got a turn first, and then I would re-roll the initiative. But in this case, I'm just kind of speeding through this. So basically, you just pass the turns and go into, whose turn it is. So now I got the cleric. I'm going to pull up his sheet. On his actions tab, he has some spells. So he wants to do bless, which is a first level spell. So I'll go ahead and click that. And the bless spell is a concentration spell. He's going to bless himself and 2 others, so probably the squishy one. So he's going to, he has a casting area that is 30 feet in range. So as a spellcaster, if you want to know who's affected, you can right click on the map, click pointers, and then draw a circle. And then you just click in the center and drag it. So centered around him, this is who he can affect. So obviously it's the whole party. But if you needed to know, like for a fireball or anything like that, that's how you do it. And it keeps the color of your dice. So whatever dice color you pick, that's the color of this image or the pointer. That way different people have different colors. So anyways, he's going to cast Bless. So all I have to do is click on it and drag it to him. So that applies the Bless effect, and it lasts for 10 rounds. And then 2 other individuals. So the rogue and the wizard. So that's basically his turn. He's going to move a little closer to the party. And that's his turn. So the human noble is going to chase down one of these goblins. So probably this one over here on the left. So I'm going to have him move over. And he has javelins and a great axe. So he's just going to come out swinging. So he's able to reach the goblin in 1 turn or 1 round. And he takes out his great axe, and he's going to use a second wind, which if he gets injured, but right now he's fine. And then I'm just going to do the swing. So that was a 4. So he swung that thing with all his strength, and that goblin ducked underneath the blade. So anyways, you get the idea of how combat works somewhat. There's more to it than just that, but at least you get an idea. That big obnoxious circle, I can right click, go to pointers, and remove pointers. So it doesn't have to stay there. The other thing is, once this is resolved, regardless of what the outcome is, you go to menu, and the party has decided to do a short rest. So if I go to rest and I click on the cone, it's a short rest for the party. We'll assume this other guy is going to die, goblin number 1, so I'm just going to remove him. And this guy they have captured, so that he's probably down to 1 hit point. So basically, this is how it resolved. And then what I'm going to do is award the party for the encounter. So they don't have to kill everything, they just have to defeat the encounter, whether they make the guy surrender or what. So I'm going to bring up the party sheet, and I'm going to bring up the encounter. So the party sheet, I just go to the XP tab, drag this thing here, this shortcut on the top left, not that one, but on the top left. And then at the end of this chapter, it says once they find the trail, which I'm going to assume they do, there's a story award. There we go. So once the everything's settled and get to the end of the session or before the next session, I click award, and each party member gets 40. And then I click the story award, and they get 60. So they each got 100 piece, or 100 XP apiece. So anyhow, the reason this number is different because some of them already had some XP. So that is basically how this works. There are a few other things that I didn't cover, but I've gone for 2 hours now. So I think I'll do the loot, and that'll be about it. So this group does not have this group of goblins didn't have any loot on them, which I think is ludicrous. First adventure, you got to have some loot. So you can make your own parcel, or you can find something else. So when I say find something else, in my library, I have a supplement from the DM's Guild called Monster Loot Lost Mines of Phandelver. So somebody has meticulously gone through all the possibilities and made a parcel for it. So in the parcels area, if I go to the monster loot and I look for goblin, this is your typical treasure for a goblin. And it's really not treasure, it's just goblin teeth and some busted up equipment. Nonetheless, it's all ready to go for me. I don't have to make it myself, but you can build your own parcels. You can even add coins at this point. So this didn't give any coins, but I'm going to go ahead and add 7 copper because that's just how I feel about it. And or I could have did it at the parcel level before I awarded it. So what happens here now is if they get to a place where they can trade or they can sell things, they can drag and drop items in and out of here if you share this sheet with them, like I showed earlier. And it allows you to divvy up the treasure. And if anything has any value, it'll sell at 50%. However, the human noble is going to step up to the storekeeper and try to sweet talk him. So I'm going to go to his skills, and I'm going to go to persuasion. The number to beat is 15. So if I went to the party sheet, or if I just remember that mentally, I'll have him roll in the dice tower. So he's going to use his persuasion, which isn't bad. But he didn't roll so great. He rolled a 13. So that guy's like, nope, no deals. It's 50% or take it or leave it. So the dwarf hears about this, and he gets a little upset, and he's like, no, I think we need something more than that. We almost lost our lives out there. So he's kind of mad that the storekeeper isn't going to give him a little bit more money. So bad thing about this is that the guy has already been bothered about a discount. So I'm going to click on disadvantage, which is a DIS button down here. And I'm going to take the intimidation roll. So the number stays the same. He has to roll a 15 or higher, but he's at disadvantage. So it's a long shot. So again, I'm going to drop it in the dice tower. Wow, a 19 and a 20. How did you beat that? Wow, this is the first time that I've ran this class that I've seen that. That's incredible. So what happens now is that the guy that's running the store is scared, and he's like, okay, we'll work it out. So the rule that I made, it's a homebrew rule, is that anytime you roll a skill check and it needs to be a certain number, especially when it comes to this money thing, 50% is a starting point. So he rolled a total of 22. So for each number above 15, he gets an extra 5%. So at 15, he's got 5. Then he's got 10. And then 15. And then 20. 25. 30. 35. So he's got 85% now, which is amazing. Now, when you sell it, it's going to be at a higher sell rate. And now all the treasure has turned into coins. And now when I click the down arrow, it distributes the coins evenly. So that's one way that you can run this. You can also have people buy, sell, and trade back and forth through dragging their inventory items onto here. So let's say you want to get rid of his common clothing. You can drag it on here. It comes off a sheet. It becomes available for someone else, or you can sell it. So there's different ways to use this, but that's the best way. So that's pretty much it. And then once I'm done with that, then I just save the work, and I'll prep for the Cragmaw Castle, or the hideout. So the Cragmaw hideout, I'm not going to get too deep into it, but there are ways that you can substitute the maps out with better maps. You can use the existing maps. They already have line of sight on them, so you shouldn't have any problems with it for official content. So if I filter the images to the Lost Mines of Phandelver maps, and then I go to Cragmaw Hideout, this is the player map, and then I can size it where I want to put it. And the reason it's dark is because there's no players on here. So if I'm just going to bring a sample player over here. So if I bring this player over here and I take ownership, then the lighting shows up, and you can see where the line of sight has been used. You couldn't normally move through this area. There's a goblin blind back here. So anyways, this is basically the end of the tutorial. Hopefully that helps you guys out. And I hope to do a couple more of these before GaryCon. So if you guys are going to run any games at GaryCon, watch this video over till you hate my voice. I've been rambling for 2 hours. I think that's a pretty good stopping point. Of course, there's a lot more to this, but I just wanted you to see the functionality of Fantasy Grounds and what you can do with it. We didn't get into character creation. That's a whole another 2-hour thing. So hopefully that helps a little. Again, this stuff will be archived on our YouTube channel, on Facebook, and on Twitch. So if you're not subscribed to those, go ahead and do that. Also, if you want to support us, we're at Patreon/FGC, which is Fantasy Grounds College. We also have a website, fantasygroundscollege.net. In our community and FGC, our Discord, we are focusing on DCC, Dungeon Crawl Classics, for this month. So the whole month is going to be dedicated to mostly that. Now, that doesn't mean that we're not going to run any D&D classes or Pathfinder or whatever. It's just that is the focus for the month. If you want more information on that, just go to our website and look for Rule Set a Month. And we also have social media posting about that. Again, I want to thank all of you for showing up and asking questions. I'll go back to those and try to answer them, and I'll tidy up the streams and get everything organized. So thanks a lot, everyone. Have a good